Escape from Tarkov Arena. It's time to do my review of what I think so far. But God, what a hell of a launch week it has been. The shit show that has happened from the release of the people getting the in-game, and on top of that, the abuse online on Twitter and everything else. My God, it has been a crazy time. I think I need more caffeine before I do this review. I come up with some ideas of what I was going to do when doing this review, but I think what I'm just going to do is just going to break down each individual section and just kind of review each bit in segments. I'm also not going to really touch on too much of the actual release of Arena because, like I said, it doesn't really have anything to do with the actual raw gameplay itself, what we're going to be reviewing. More to do with like BSG and how they actually want to release the game to people. Not exactly the best way, but let's just brush over that and get to the actual gameplay itself. So any of you guys who have been living under a rock and you don't know what Escape from Tarkov Arena is, essentially it's an arena-based shooter like Call of Duty was back in the day, or even is still now, but it's set in the Escape from Tarkov universe. So it's got the realistic weapon feeling and recoil system and the kind of realistic Russian post-apocalyptic view from the Escape from Tarkov universe. So it's going to feel completely different to any other arena-based shooter you've played in the past, put it that way. If any of you guys who are Escape from Tarkov fans and have played the game, you know exactly what I mean by this. Now the game itself is launched in early access, meaning that it's kind of in like a bare state at the moment, and they plan on building like blocks and blocks of more stuff added in the future for the game. So I must admit, when it comes to like game modes and different maps and that, there aren't exactly that many. Starting on that, there are only actually 2 main game modes added at the moment. We know that there's going to be more coming in the future. We don't know when they're going to be coming at the moment, but all we have at the moment is the standard 5v5 mode, where it's a TDM based mode, and then there's an objective at the end if it gets to the end of the time limit and no one's been killed. And then if no one still captures that, then they have like a cleanup system where the scavs and AI come in and they'll start to try and kill you to get rid of the remaining players. And if that doesn't work, then there's a poison based system what kind of takes over you, and it really goes down to who can either survive the AI longer or who can out heal the actual like poison effect that's going on. Like I said, that in its own is kind of like a janky feeling, because for any of you guys who don't know, they've built this game with the idea of it becoming an esport. So just that alone, I don't think this game mode is going to be set up for esport, or I hope not anyway, because that end bit doesn't really make it like fair competitive for an esport anyway. That's the one mode. Then there's another mode as well, what I touched on quite a lot, what I think is actually kind of more of my preferred one actually, is the tournament mode. So it's a 2v2 mode. Yeah, we will go with like 4 different teams. It's on the same maps, but they're made smaller, and then you'll kind of like take turns in fighting each other in the arena. And then when the rounds aren't happening and you're not involved in it, you'll sit in the sidelines in the rafters, and then you'll be able to look down and watch the game happening from afar. And it also as well, there's a little leaderboard as well, what tells you where you are and to see where you're placing in the tournament as it stands. The reason why I'm looking forward to this mode specifically is because I want to set up custom games in the future and start hosting my own tournaments in my community. So I think this would probably be the most competitive way of doing this and the most fun as well. And like I said, it's got a built-in system where you get to monitor and watch at the same time. But on the topic of the custom modes at the moment, there is a custom game mode selection right now, but it is very bare bones. So essentially all you're doing is just setting up a game. The only things you get to select is the map, the game mode, and then what server it goes onto. There's no real like deep customization for the custom games. What I do think is really missing, I think that they really need to push the custom games and let the community go wild with it. Let people select, you know, what kits you get to have. There'll be a spectator mode, for instance. So for instance, if I wanted to stream it, then I could be a spectator and just watch people play and then commentate over the like tournaments that people get to set up and that kind of thing. Like there's a lot what could be done to it, but I hope they do add this stuff in the future. But while covering the game modes, let's talk about the actual weapons themselves and the preset system that's been set in place. Now this has got its own host of problems, but it is very linear and quite easy to explain. So essentially there are 4 classes, and each of these classes you have 2 separate skill trees, and when you dedicate yourself to one skill tree by playing that certain class, you will then gain XP for that set skill tree and then get progression towards the next class lower than that. But this is also where the grinding takes place, because what I found is like the first class, when you go down to the next one, is about 5 to 6 games of experience before you get to that. Then at times it's by 4, and then at times it's by like 4 or 10 again. It just gets so crazy the further and further you go down. So just to get down one skill tree to the very bottom, you would have to put in like 400-500 games. And if you work it out, there's about 8 skill trees in total, so it's a lot of time. Now, these skill trees at the moment are working into some balancing issues right now, where people are finding out that there's certain selections where like some of the presets are better in the kind of same categories as them. So when you're going against people in your similar category when it comes to the skill trees and how far they're down, some are better than others. But that's obviously like going to happen on a brand new game where they haven't fully tested it with this many people just yet. So we expect this to change in the future. The main issue that comes from the skill trees at the moment, what everybody's talking about at the moment, what I think that's probably the biggest issue with Escape from Tarkov Arena at the moment, is once you start progressing down one of the skill trees and you decide, oh, I don't really like the kits down this skill tree, I want to play on a different skill tree. You want to go do that, then you're going to be at a significant disadvantage because you're going to be playing on a worse kit, and you think, well, if it matches me against people with similar kits, that would work. But it doesn't work like that. But because there's only a rank mode at the moment and no casual mode in Arena, you will be based upon your rank. So say, for instance, you start working down that skill tree, you've got MMR points goes up and your skill points go up, and you start playing against better players with better kits. When you then jump to that worse kit, you still have that same ranking. So you're still placed against people who have been, who are just going down one tree and just sticking to that one. So it kind of like eliminates you from going to try any of the other skill trees at all. I think one way they can combat this is, instead of having like, you going down one specifically skill tree, you can play one specific class, but you can select a different skill tree that you want the experience to go to. So you can still play at that advantage having that better kit, but then you can start working your way down a different tree if you wanted to do that. But there are a few ways they could change this to work around it. I do think that these definitely needs to change though. But let's move on to the next point. It's going to be talking about performance. It's a big question I got from a lot of people when I was streaming it who hadn't had access to the game yet, were asking me how it ran. Surprisingly very well. And the reason why I say surprisingly very well is because I was checking my FPS counter in game, and it was saying I was getting between like 70 to 80 FPS on average, what is less than I thought it would be considering the maps and how small they are. Because say, for instance, if I played Factory on Escape from Tarkov, I get about 120, 130 FPS on that. Like capped, and it would always stay like that and it would never change. But for instance, on Arena, the maps aren't too much bigger, but I'm getting far worse. But it feels smoother. It's very strange. It's like, for instance, when I play Streets of Tarkov on Escape from Tarkov, it says to me that I'm getting between 60 and 70 FPS on that, but my god, does it feel like I'm getting 20, 25. I feel like it's actually lying to me. It's something to do with the frame timing or something. I'm not entirely sure. There'll be some more technical people up there who will know like exact details for like what is going on there and why it feels worse at a lower FPS than it does at a high FPS. But when I'm actually playing Arena, I never once like thought about turning on the FPS count and saying, oh my god, like, am I getting dropping frames? Like, it just felt smooth all in out. There were no like frame drops or anything. But I do have a mid to like higher end PC. Like, for anyone who wants to know, I am running a 3070, and for the CPU I have a 3800X3D. Yeah, that's the one. By AMD, so it's pretty decent. But then that kind of leads me on to the other performance thing, where it's kind of like hit registration, because obviously people ask about that, because Tarkov is very known to have kind of like hit registration issues when things don't quite work out the way that they're shown on screen, or so forth and so forth. But from what I got from the first couple of days of playing, it did feel really good. But I will say, because of how they released the game to the public, where they were kind of drip feeding it, I was very lucky. I got in on day 2 of the Arena release, and I was the first person out of like my entire friend group to get into it. And even now, 5-6 days afterwards, there aren't really many people of my friends who have still got it, so it's very limited. But I've noticed as the days have gone on and the servers have got more and more people as they release the game to more and more people, the hit registration has gotten worse. And the thing in the past is it was kind of hard in Tarkov for you to understand like what they were seeing on their screen because of how the hit registration works. But it's a lot easier in Arena for you to call that kind of BS out, because obviously now they've got a kill cam. So when you die, you can then see what they saw on your screen. You're like, I definitely know on my screen I was right round that corner, but on his I hadn't even passed the corner yet. So you can kind of call the BS on that. And obviously they saw that they were having issues with that even in the LAN servers, when we saw some footage back from Arena about 4 or 5 weeks before we even had this big event, what kind of released it anyway. But again, I can't touch on this too much because obviously it is very early days. They could still be working on it. Obviously they're still releasing the game. More and more people are getting loaded onto the servers. They could have more servers backed up in the future, what could change that experience. So it's hard to say, but for right now I am starting to see some issues with the hit registration. And I think we need to talk about the maps now. And I must say, the maps is probably one of the best key points I would say about Arena right now. The development and the team who was set behind how designing the maps done a a very good job. A lot of the maps are very linear, and a couple of them are like perpendicular. So what's the word? Perpendicular is not the word I'm looking for. It's like, you know, when they're mirrored on both sides, so it doesn't matter which side you spawn on, they'll be exactly the same. I can't quite think of the word to describe that, but you guys get what I mean by that. So out of the 5 maps so far, there's only one that I don't particularly like too much because it is just a little bit too crowded. And that is Bay 5 with all of the shipping containers. I just feel like that one is like, there's just too much randomness of just like containers just chucked absolutely everywhere and everything's just too close to it, one another. I don't particularly like it very much. It's very easy to get lost and to kind of like not understand what's going on where the sound is because there's so much like debris and everything in the way. But the other maps I've played quite extensively now over the last 3 or 4 days, and I've had an absolute blast on them, and I do really like them. I think my favorite one is the hangar one. That seems to be the one that we play the most because people are saying online at the moment, if you select all 5 maps that you want to play all 5 maps, it seems to pick it in alphabetical order. I don't know why it has a preference for that, so you just seem to always get hangar all the time, and then you never kind of see sawmill. I think I might have played that map maybe 3 times, but I must have played hangar half of my games at least. But hey, I'm not going to complain too much. I really like the map. So, and I think I maybe need to brush over the guns and how they kind of feel as well, because a lot of people have been saying that the guns feel different to what they do in Escape from Tarkov. I'm not sure whether I can quite agree with that. Maybe the recoil's a little bit less. We are still working on the old recoil system. For people who play Escape from Tarkov, they know that we're getting a brand new overhaul for the recoil system in the game in the next couple of weeks when the wipe happens, and that will be coming to Arena as well. We do not have that in the game currently, but that might be slightly adjusted. But the guns and the feel definitely feel a lot better when it comes to like the inertia system as well, because obviously people are worried about inertia too. But you've got to take into consideration that when you're playing Arena, you're not having to carry around a giant bag absolutely filled with just loot spewing out fucking galore everywhere. Like, you've literally just got your kit, your base kit, nothing else. You don't pick anything else up while you're in game. Sometimes you might pick a kit up from someone else if you need some extra ammo. Majority of the time you're just running what you have, so you feel quite light all the time. But then again, I haven't gone into the later trees where you get like the big heavy 4 armors, level 6, and like ult and helmets and stuff like that. So we'll have to wait and see if that changes anything for the moment. I would also like to speak about like what the kind of the community feelings. I've been looking online obviously to see what the community feel, and when I've actually found information just about the game and what the community say, people seem to be quite positive about it. Apart from like I said, the preset systems need a bit of a rework. Obviously it's completely and utterly just flooded out by just angry customers right now, obviously by the EOD owners who just don't have access to the game, because like I said, the release of Arena was definitely backwards by BSG. But I do touch on a few points from what I have seen from people who are actually playing the game and who are enjoying it right now. Obviously they are, but again, obviously you've got to take that with a pinch of salt, because you've got that kind of like rose tinted glasses when you get onto a brand new game. Everyone's like, I love it, I love it, I love it, and then, you know, a week later they're like, oh my god, this like certain point in the game is so annoying, I can't think I can continue playing anymore. Because obviously when you first start playing something, you just have that kind of like said rose tinted glasses feeling. You just kind of look at it and think, oh yeah, everything's just amazing, it's just so great, I'm just in love, man. But one positive thing to say about BSG is they've done a very good job so far with already kind of addressing some of the concerns that we have for the game. So one thing was the announcer was so annoying. He was so loud and just so obnoxious, and he'd be constantly talking all the time. They haven't got rid of the announcer, but they have put an update out and they have lowered the volume so he's not so obnoxious. And I'm pretty sure they also removed this like static noise that would happen at the beginning of the game, like, you know, like you're trying to go radio one but you don't get the quite setting and it goes a whistling noise in your ear. That was added in on purpose, and it would happen randomly every couple of times, but they seem to remove that as well, so that's also quite nice. And they've also done some changes to the preset system, so they are listening to what we're saying about what's good and what's not and what we kind of want changing and making adjustments to it. But obviously that just was met with just even more negative feedback from the community, because they were like, I don't care about the adjustments you're making to the game, I don't even have access to playing it yet. But I do have to kind of laugh because it is kind of a backwards mentality. They're kind of already working on making changes to the game without actually getting more people onto the game and playing it, the people who already actually purchased the game. So overall, I do feel like Arena is a pretty solid experience, but the real question is, do I think it's worth £35? And I'll be honest with you, I do not think it is. I think for an attachment to EOD, like I said, majority of us, like myself, when I purchased EOD those many moons ago, Arena was never included in that. We never thought we were getting it. It was like a bonus add-on, and I was like, oh, brilliant. So I get access to this other game for free, and why other people are going to have to pay for it just because I own EOD. So I thought that's brilliant. So for an add-on for EOD, obviously with Escape from Tarkov and all the DLCs that come in the future, great. Like I said, freebie on the side, it's amazing. Can't complain whatsoever. But would I buy it right now for 35? Do I feel like there's enough content in there to to keep me entertained for that price tag? No, I just don't think there is. Do I think there will be in the future? Yes. Obviously, like I said, this is an early access title. They said that there's going to be lots of new things coming in the future. There'll be new maps, more presets, different game modes, other things coming in the future will then justify the price of the game. Now, the real question is, do you believe in the company and the studio behind it who are going to support that throughout the time? And again, I would also say yes. Look at Escape from Tarkov, for instance. The game has been in early development for, God, what, the alpha was, what, 7 years ago? And then we've had beta for the last 4 or 5 years. And they're still pushing development and still adding stuff to it even today. Yeah, I would say it's probably a worth investment to see that this game will probably go somewhere in the future and that BSG will put their time and effort into it. Do I think they've botched the job, though, with the rolling out of the game? Of course they have. Do I think maybe that they lost a few community members and people who are going to play the game because of that as well? Definitely as well. But overall, I like it. I think Arena's great. I'm definitely playing more of it. Obviously going to be streaming it as I normally will do for everything else that I do Escape from Tarkov content as well. So until the next one, guys, I appreciate anyone who has stuck out this far in the video. Remember to like and subscribe for more content from me, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Ta for now.